Welcome to another fine episode of Malden Talks with your host, Joe Gray. Tonight, we're going to have a discussion with the councilors at large, all the candidates. We have 4 beautiful candidates here who are going to talk on a variety of issues. I'm going to send some questions, and we're going to have some discussion about issues that are important to Malden voters. All of the questions tonight were supplied by voters from around the city. I did not supply any of these questions. The only thing I've done is I've tried to eliminate redundancies to pare down the question list, and it covers a wide variety of topics. So, without wasting anyone else's time, we're going to have the candidates introduce themselves, and we're going to get right to it. Let's start off with Councilor Steve Winslow. Could you please say a few words?
Yeah, thank you, Joe, for hosting this, and thank everybody in the community that submitted questions. My name is Steve Winslow. I'm currently a councilor at large and serving out my first term. I'm the junior city councilor right now. I am running for re-election in November. I think we've, as a council, we've been very successful, and I want to continue that. One of the key successes I worked on is I heard so much in the community about transportation and traffic safety being key things, and I made it a priority to work with my fellow councilors and the mayor so the city will be hiring a transportation planner. That's in the process right now so that we have someone on staff who can work with our residents to make our streets safer for seniors and our kids, and that so we can secure more funding to make our streets better and stretch our road improvement money. With my fellow councilors here, we had voted on another $20 million to fix our pipes and roads, and so that'll all be happening in the next 5 years, and I think we'll want to see more. I mean, I've been working to see that we ensure and keep a high quality of life in our neighborhoods, working with Councilors Kamel and Anderson and others to improve our parks and open spaces, looking at affordable housing. I've also been focusing on making sure that we as a community are listening to the very diverse population that we have, and working with youth and others to try to expand participation in our government. Thank you.
Okay, next for opening remarks, we'll have City Councilor Craig Spadafora.
Thank you very much. I want to echo Councilor Winslow's thank yous to people joining us and Mr. Gray putting this together. It's always good to get out and have a discussion with the residents of Malden. I guess if Steve's the junior councilor, I'm the senior councilor. You know, I've said it before, and I will echo that. I think the last couple of years in Malden have been exciting. This is a very powerful council. I say that with all enthusiasm. There's a lot of talent here in terms of, shut off my mic, Joe? On terms of different expertise, and it's coming together. You know, 4 years ago, the city was probably at a crossroads, and there were some major changes that made not only to the city in terms of structural, but also just the DNA. And I think City Hall was one of them, simply because we're starting to see some life in there, bringing some youth in, bringing some retail environments. We've passed the Community Preservation Act, which is finally becoming something of a real great windfall for us in terms of there are meetings that all the councils up here are probably having to discuss various park improvements, historical stuff, housing, and that money is really coming to fruition, and I'm excited to see what that money can do for this community. It is a windfall in terms of it's something that the budget just cannot structurally hold. And we have the opportunity to do all those kind of wish lists that the residents and the councils wanted to do. Something I'm proud of, and I continue to fight for. Steve hit on the head in terms of walkability and the bike path and access, but also just safety in general. I mean, Malden is a transient community. Parking to me has been an issue, but more importantly now, all the councils up here have heard it. The speeding, the number of cars in our streets have probably become an epidemic. And how do we do that? We definitely make public transportation more accessible, but also enforcement. I know I spent a considerable amount of my money this year putting up new signage. And one thing I will continue to echo is that we need the police department just to do more traffic enforcement, because the number of signs and painted crosswalks and all the fancy lights we want to put up does nothing without them writing tickets to slow this down. And it's not just one part of the city, it's every part of the city. So I think the council has done their part. We've funded a lot of these programs. We've put a lot of money into mechanical structures. Now we just need to see more of that. Another thing I think the city's done a tremendous job is making sure we've been investing in our education system. We've done over a number of buildings in the community. We brought a new superintendent in. It seems to be working in terms of a lot of the students I talked to are happy. We are nowhere near where we need to be. The mayor, I think, has been continuing to put funding into those resources, and I want to see that happening. But overall, I'm very happy of how the city of Malden is going. I'm excited to see the next couple of years.
Okay, next up, we're going to have an opening statement from candidate Jerry Leone.
Hello, thank you, and I want to echo what Councilor Winslow and Councilor Spadafora said. Thank you for everyone that's attending tonight. I think the majority of people know who I am. If you don't know me, my name is Jerry Leone, former school committee member of Ward 6. And 2 years ago, I ran unsuccessfully for city councilor, and I had 2 years off, and people think I'm crazy for trying to come back. But I have a passion for Malden, lifelong resident in Ward 6, Malden High School, and I graduated from the Police Academy of the United States Air Force Reserve. So public safety is a big priority to me, and as I go around the city, there are a lot of good things. At the same time, on the flip side, there are a lot of things that people are not happy about. And this is going to sound too cliche, but this is probably the most important election Malden will have, because there's a mayor's race, and I know, and I always joke around, I don't know if the three councilors up here were upset that I jumped in, but if I didn't run, who holds the three accountable in the city? And so a challenge is healthy, as we all know. And a lot of topics are going to be covered tonight, and we'll talk about what, why people are happy or unhappy. So I look forward to this forum tonight, and thank you.
And finally, we'll talk to Councilor Debbie DeMaria.
Thank you, Mr. Gray, and thank you to Malden Talks and everyone here present. I think this actually screams how wonderful our community is, that we have volunteers that are taking time out of their lives to be with us and to hear the important issues and get prepped to vote on November 5th. My name is Debbie DeMaria, and I am a counselor at large. This will be my 4th term going in as your counselor, representing each and every one of you. And I think for me, that is my most important issue, is to listen to all of you, to listen to the diverse community that we have in Malden, and to be more transparent. It is so important to me. Having said that, I'm very proud of just recently getting Habitat for Humanity to Malden. We're building a 6-unit and 2 single families on Main Street, and it's a wonderful affordable housing project that we can all participate in. So that was one of my big pushes last year as council president. We accomplished so much, and I do agree with the councilors up here that we have an amazing council right now, but we have an amazing council because each and every one of you are involved, and you help us drive the bus, and that's what's so important to me. So just an opening statement, so I'll wait for the other questions. Thank you again.
All right. Okay, this is where I come back on screen. Okay, we're going to cover a diverse section of topics that were supplied, like I said before, by voters of Malden. And we're going to start with you, Councilor DeMaria,
Okay.
and we're just going to go around. Overall topic dealing with the past. What is one change in Malden that you really think the public benefits from or that they like?
I think it's the transparency, and I have to hang my hat on the fact that we now have public comment abilities, so that each and every resident can come to City Council during the allocated time and have 2 minutes or more to speak on the subject that's on the docket. And I'm super proud of that. It took about 1.5 years to move it forward on the council, but I'm very happy that our community has that.
Okay, Jerry, can you comment on that as well?
Yes, thank you. I'll agree with Councilor DeMaria. For the last 2 years, that was a big deal because we had that on the school committee, public forum, and I know Debbie and Councilor Winslow were both at one time on the school committee, so that was very important, and I know a lot of people were complaining about that at one point, the city council. So the last 2 years, that's a very important step, so the taxpayers, who are the voters as well, can voice their opinion.
Councilor Spadafora?
I would say, that's a tough question. I would say Community Preservation Act. And the reason why I would say that is, I don't know if everybody likes it. Somebody who was a little bit concerned in the beginning, it is starting to pay in dividends, like I said in my earlier opening. The money is coming in, and it's not our money, it's everybody in the audience's money. But that small additional base on your taxes, while I know it's not always easy to pay more, I think that little amount of money will do wonders for us going forward, and we're starting to see it because you had to wait a year to get the money. There is some matching, but there's a lot of great projects that are coming forward, and not just by councilors or government officials, it's actually the residents who want to do great work with it. So the residents who probably have a problem paying that additional tax, I think they will probably reconsider once they put their foot in a new park, or they have the ability to walk in hopefully some green space, or maybe look at the city's archives in a way that's better for the community. So I would say, as somebody who was reluctant, I'm very happy we passed it, and I think it's going to do a lot of wonders for generations to come.
Good. Councilor Winslow, could you please expand on that?
Yeah, just on that, first, I want to thank Councilor DeMaria and Councilor Spadafora for sticking to their guns last council to make sure the community stay involved. I know there was some concern that the council was going to be that group, and I think it's great that you guys stood your ground and made sure that the community stayed in the Community Preservation Act. So for me, I think, personally, the great work the community did over the years to get the bicycle trail built. I know I worked with Councilor Spadafora in the day, and the mayor, been a big champion. It was even just happening going down the street today, Valley Street, meeting a new neighbor, literally moving in tonight. They said the presence of the bike trail was one of the reasons they moved to Malden. You go to the bike trail, and I think my proudest thing is that we talk about Malden being a diverse community, and you go down the trail and you see the diverse amount of people using it, whether it's families walking their kids to the schools, high school students, walking with their friends, people out enjoying a jog in the middle of the day. It's a very popular facility, and with that spirit, I'm using the skills and knowledge I learned from that to apply that in a broader way to help all our transportation needs. So I think that's a building block that we can use, and it creates a transportation facility and a recreational facility, and I think it's made a tremendous change in the perceptions of Malden in a positive way, and it cleaned up a very dirty, overgrown area that people used to break into businesses from, and now it's a great community asset. So that's the type of work that I do and I'm committed to in the long run, and I continue to do that. So I think that's a big thing, and I appreciate all the support of the councilors over the years to make that happen. So.
Okay, let's continue on the past or slight variation of the same question, starting with you, candidate Leone. What were your goals when you first ran, and have you accomplished them?
When I first ran for council or a school committee?
Any of the above.
Well, my goals from
Yeah,
all,
this is wide open.
well, my legacy on the school committee was 3 very important things. One was the whole fiasco with in my opinion, the Common Core in the park. When that was first enrolled, a lot of parents, I got called and emailed that their students couldn't understand the questions. And I was the only member of the school committee at the time that voted no I lost 8-1, and I tried to support MCAS, and I lost that vote. Another important time on the school committee was when I stood with the custodians, when the school department was gonna outsource them, and what, people always try to use, the national scene. It wasn't about Republican or Democrat, it was the right thing to do. A lot of the custodians were from Malden. I stood by them, I lost that vote as well. I was part of a lot of losing battles on the school committee, but I was a thorn in a lot of people's sides for that. And probably my biggest thing was spearheading the co-op hockey program with former school committee member, with another Maria Doucette, where we spearheaded that and we helped raise $20,000 to co-op with Revere. Malden and Revere had a team. Moving forward now, my goal for Malden is eventually to have a fire station on the side, because
We'll deal with future goals later.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we'll cover that.
Okay.
Councilor Spadafora, same question. What were your goals when you first ran, and have you accomplished them?
Well, I ran so long ago the first time, but goals change. I would say my first goal when I was running for councilor at large, the first time it was quality of life issues, especially in the neighborhoods. Do I think I've accomplished them? I think you can never accomplish them because you always want to keep on raising that standard. Some of the things I'm proud about, it's not the sexy stuff that makes the headlines. It's fixing and tightening your ordinances in the background that really have probably no effect until the residents realize they're building a 5-story building next to your house, or how can you put a building up with 3 parking spots? So a lot of those changes I made were even something as simple as the elevation and grading of buildings. And that sounds silly, but we live in an area where there's a lot of hilly terrain, and in Ward 3, there was somebody building a house on the side of the mountain, and as they were building that side of the house, rocks were falling in this person's backyard. So quality of life issues were always my goal. I constantly have been banging the table to make sure we increase those quality of life issues. Some of the things are increasing the housing lot size in the city of Malden. I know it might seem archaic and stupid at this point, but I think you should have at least 5,000 or 6,000 square feet for a home. And we continue to fight that battle. A lot of this development is stopped because when they see the tightening to that, and again with my fellow colleagues here, it's not easy to do those things, and it doesn't make the headlines, but it protects what we have left here, and it all goes into quality of life and green space and livability. The other issue too, I would say, is parking, and that's not a goal that I have not been able to get through. I think we've done some tremendous work here. It's not always an easy thing, but I'm hoping to see that go forward in some capacity, and I think the newest one, or the latest evolution of it with no cost to the resident, I think is something that's exciting. But that's the goal that I kind of still have out there, as a dangling chat, as they say. And I hope to get that accomplished. But there's a lot of things I want to see in the future.
Councilor Winslow, same question.
Yeah, one of my key first priorities was transportation. When I first sat down with the mayor and he was wondering what I wanted to focus on, I mean, based on my experience in other communities, a transportation planner could make a big difference. The first budget, the mayor couldn't work that in, but I spent the time working with the council and showing that we were missing opportunities as a community because we didn't have a transportation planner. And so, and formed a long-term transportation committee to study that, and was able to convince the mayor and the council that that was a valuable position. So we are hiring that person. Just in general in transportation, another $500,000 to fix our sidewalks so that our seniors and folks like Chris and other people can cross the street safely. Passing with the support of the council and councilors Murphy and Crow, who led the effort to lower our speed limit to 25 miles an hour, pass our complete streets policy. So those are some key things. Putting into place the things we need in this time, so we'll be able to get more money in the future. So that's one thing. Another thing is working with Councilor DeMaria and others on transparency, passing public comment, and working with Councilor President Sika this year to release more minutes from our meetings and that type of thing. So those are some things. So the other thing is just with transparency, then comes other things of just being out there and opening up and talking to the community, working to make sure the community preservation funds are spent in a thoughtful way with the communities and other things. So those are those are some key goals that I had coming in. I think I've accomplished those, and want to go further and take even to a higher level next term.
Sounds good. Councilor DeMaria, same question.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think when I came onto council, Malden was changing. Malden was in a whole new, they were on a starting line. And, from the previous administration. And I saw that we could do so much better. We could reach out to our diverse community and, address concerns. Things like ping pong at the senior center. Things like getting signage up for handicap parking. Safety was always my biggest concern, but I feel that I helped move Malden into the next baseball team, the next base. And I pushed for being more respectful on the city council and working together more. And I felt that is how we can accomplish more. If we work together and disagree respectfully, and under that, so many things were productive and so many things happened. But I think I was the segue to moving Malden forward.
Excellent. Those are some great answers. Okay, let's move on to the next topic. We're going to cover some questions concerning revenue. Councilor Spadafora, what is your plan to raise additional revenue for the city?
In general revenue, you gotta be specific here with revenue.
I'm presenting the questions
As it was stated?
as they were given to me.
All right. Revenue is obviously, revenue is mostly always considered taxes, right? It's a user tax, whatever you want to call it. You want to call your tax 2.5% as a tax. Revenue to me is we've gone to the residents an awful lot over the last couple of years. And every city has, unfortunately, because that's where it is. There's only 2 ways to raise revenue, or 3 ways actually to raise revenue in any state. It's fees, permits, and levies. It's taxes and fines. If you want to call state grants or federal grants revenue, you can, but those are the main sources of revenue. We have been a victim of our own success in terms of a lot of housing has come to Malden, and not always the type of housing we want, but that's what we have here. I think the council here has been focusing, we've tried to get a lot more ownership here. Affordability has been a topic, and I know it's still going around here, but in terms of bringing additional revenue in here, we're seeing it in forms of new entertainment. I mean, there's a lot more restaurants in Malden in the last 5 years than there's been in the city in the last 10. We're starting to see some unique business opportunities filling up here in terms of there's some gaming centers here. There's a new place going down the square. It's called Bit Bar, which is a restaurant and an arcade game. That would have never been here. And those fees not only come from their entertainment licenses, but their sales tax and just the commercial tax. And that's not necessarily going to the users, but the patrons. And a lot of our citizens have been going to our surrounding communities and spending those leisure dollars. What I'd like to see is bringing in that type of entertainment, restaurants, diversification, even museums, things like that. The other piece of revenue that I think is we always forget about, but we have talked about at the council, is manufacturing. And people kind of shrug, oh, we're Malden, you can't be manufacturing. Manufacturing can be many forms today. It's light manufacturing, it's even marijuana cultivation, it's technology, it's robotics. All those things are quote unquote clean manufacturing. The good thing about manufacturers, commercial people pay more money in taxes. That's everywhere, and hopefully they bring revenue here. So my focus would be, we've brought enough in terms of residential. Bring some hotels, bring some light manufacturing. It's good for our students too if we have some of these jobs. I know the mayor's been trying to get the old Bank of America building now to use that top several floors to build something like a Google world to bring in some technology and robotics. And it's happening in Somerville, it's happening in Cambridge, it's parts of Medford are doing it now. So we could be the natural kind of resource for that. And when you bring in more jobs and more revenue, when you bring in more jobs in commercial space, you're going to bring in more revenue. We can't keep on going to residents because the wallets are getting empty. So for me, it's bringing in revenue, not necessarily getting revenue from the same source.
Okay, Councilor Winslow, could you please answer the same one? What is your plan to raise additional revenue for the city?
Well, I mean, a few key things. I think the whole council supports efforts by Senator Lewis as head of the Education Committee to secure more funding for our schools. If we really were funded by the better formula for Chapter 70, we'd be getting like another $15 million, which make a tremendous difference in our budget. So we got a little bit more. We were able to hire 20 new teachers this year, but that would make an incredible difference to our overall budget. So that's one of the things, is working with our state delegation there. I think there are other things. Ultimately, we have this year, and working with Councilor O'Malley and Councilor Spadafora as leads, passing the cannabis ordinance. So that's, hopefully will generate some revenue that we can dedicate in the community, and we're working on that. We have a lot of applications, and I think in the next few years we should see that revenue come in. And I do want to make sure we dedicate the first chunk of that revenue to make sure we're addressing any overdose and addiction crises, but then maybe we will have revenue to help our schools and other things like traffic signals. I think the other thing is looking at responsible growth. Though in principle, it's always great to think of commercial development, and it's great we do get more taxes out of that. One of the things I've learned in working in multiple communities in the Commonwealth in community development offices, that the reality is the modern 21st century economy is really driven by people. Manufacturing has gone out of the country. We do have some manufacturing here. It tends to be very smart manufacturing, and those people tend to be very highly educated, either at our vocational schools or community colleges. So one of the things you have to do is make sure your community is an attractive place for people to live, work, and play. And I think the idea is downtown, we're creating a restaurant and gaming district. That's helpful. And I think there are other opportunities as we look at Commercial Street. We have some planning there. We have things happening on Broadway. So it's a combination of, we do need to think about that workforce that can drive and bring revenue to new businesses, needs a place to live affordably here, needs an attractive community. And I think that's one of the things. You look at the Somervilles and Cambridges of the world. Cambridge over 30 years ago made a commitment to make sure they were a safe, walkable community and accommodate bicycling and transit. They've actually, in a place like Kendall Square, reduced traffic and created a great commercial base and a very great tax revenue, and building new residents there. So I think we can look at those models. We have to make sure that we accommodate the workers of the future if we're going to drive our economy and raise revenue for the city. So that's one of the things I see. But I think the MRA did a study in Commercial Street and is going to do one with Broadway. I think we have to look at those type of things as opportunities. Quite typically in Somerville and other communities, they look at what those corridors can unleash in terms of commercial and residential development, and then they work to get the state and federal funding to build the transportation that'll make that happen. So it's a combination of building a community vision and then going out and getting the resources to make that happen. So that's how we can create revenue. Thanks, bud.
That sounds good. Okay, Councilor DeMaria, what would be your plan to help raise additional revenue for the city?
Okay, thank you, Joe. So I think first and foremost was passing the Community Preservation Act. That is 2% of our taxes. That goes into a fund which is matched by the state, and it is earmarked for affordable housing, for historical preservation, open space, and those are projects that might never get done without that funding. So that was a big, a great project. Second of all, my inaugural speech, I know it was, it kind of took people by surprise, but I supported the cannabis dispensaries coming to Malden. So last year, we worked very hard zoning where these businesses would go. And this year, we are vetting through the possibilities of new businesses. So, and third of all, I would say that this last year we formed a parking department, and this year we're working on cleaning up the cars in the city at no cost to the residents. So we've held 4 meetings over the summer. We're moving forward in September for that. And I think the new parking department will gain lots of revenue, and I'm very happy about that. 3 years ago, we were all biting our nails when we passed the city budget. We really, it was a very difficult task. Last year, we had a very smooth budget, and this year, this past June, we did as well. So I think we tightened our belt, and we're looking at new opportunities, which again is moving Malden forward. So thank you.
That sounds good. Going forward, we're having some mic issues. So instead of leaning forward into the mic, if everyone could like sit back a little bit, I think the actual gain pickup is overloading the system a little bit. And besides, the mic, if you sit back, it'll pick you up. You will get picked up on audio anyways, okay? So, Jerry, same to you. Your plan to raise additional revenue for the city.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, everyone can
it's
hear
all-
you.
I can hear you.
How's the tester? Okay. Nicely. The common theme up here seems to be commercial business, which is great. That's what I support. Why can't Malden have an assembly row? Why can't we, more business needs to be brought into, obviously lessen the tax burden on the people, but there's, I agree with Councilor Spadafora, there's too many residential apartments. At first, 2 years ago, I was against the dispensaries when they did the moratorium, because the majority of people in Ward 6 didn't want that, and I was listening to the people of my ward. But now that it's happening in Malden, if we do it the right way, my income's gonna come in, which is good. That's the key word, the right way. And if elected, I will make sure that the money goes towards that. We have other, goals too, and we'll touch upon that, like you said, later on. But if we had the money, we could do a lot of things. When I was on the school committee, I pushed for health teachers in all the schools. One of my colleagues started FAD, Families Against Drugs, where we were educating students and parents at an early age. Why can't, this money that we're streaming in, why can't we have a rehab center in Malden? So these are just some of the things that, obviously, as this forum goes on, we can touch, upon. But that's just the common thing we need. We need more commercial business in Malden.
Okay, let's move on to a new topic. Job description. Councilor Winslow, a pretty straightforward question. What does a city councilor do? So that the average voter can understand.
I'm gonna take notes.
Okay.
It's a simple question,
It's-
but it's also complex.
No,
at the
it's
same
not.
time.
No, it's interesting to me. I mean, one of the things I've learned in my first term here as councilor at large, I had the opportunity before serving on the city council to work with multiple mayors. Mayor Howard, Mayor McGlynn, and Mayor Rigucci as part of the MRA and the Telecom City project. I worked with Mayor Curtatone in Somerville, Mayor Kirk, and Mayor Fake and Mayo up in Gloucester. So I kind of know how the executive side of government works, but the legislative is different. One of the key things for a councilor is you're one of 11 people. So you one of the roles you have and you can do is introduce legislation that can impact the city. It can be zoning in terms of housing. It can be ordinances that affect your quality of life. It can be being on the finance committee and reviewing the budget and passing that. So you have this individual role, but it's very dependent on your fellow counselors. So I'm very proud to say that, with my coming on and Councilor Kamel, I think this council's been working together very smoothly under President DeMaria and President Sika. We've accomplished a lot. And a lot of that work goes on in subcommittees. There's a role of introducing legislation. The other role is to be in these subcommittees, working out the nitty-gritty details of the ordinances, of the budgets, being really kind of a board of directors, double checking that our departments are proposing budgets that are appropriate, working with our staff to implement ordinances that are fair to our residents and businesses. So that's really, like I say, a key role is to initiate legislation and then vet it to make sure it's good legislation for our city, as well as making sure the money we spend, the taxpayers' money that we spend on your behalf is spent wisely. So I think those are a couple of key things that we do. And like I say, and it takes teamwork to do that. And I think we've been working great together as a team. So that's my impression after 2 years. I'd be interested to hear others say so. But
Okay, Councilor DeMaria, job description.
So-
What does a city councilor do?
I think Councilor Winslow did a great job recapping it. We are the legislative branch of the city, so our main objective is the ordinances. We also listen to the constituents as they bring forth concerns and fit that into our role. We also continuously review these ordinances, and it's just so vast. I don't know. I never realized how busy a city councilor could be. I think that the 11 of us now really work, I'm not going to say harder than any other council, but we really put a lot of effort into it. 8 hours a day, sometimes 10 hours a day, weekends. And I think it's because our residents demand more of us, and that's a good thing. So it's a circle. They demand of us, we work harder, and the city becomes better. So, there's just committee meetings, and we have 7 direct reports that report to us. The compliance officers, the city solicitor, the city clerk, we have a secretary, clerk of committee, we have our controller, our treasurer. So we have people that actually directly report to us, and so we're managing them as well. So yeah, it's like a 5-fold job that I love.
That sounds great. Jerry, your impression, what does a city councilor do? Do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I think the question should have been, what's the role of an at-large council? Because that's a lot of the questions I usually get, like what's the difference between the two? I always tell people, if you bring a problem to your counselor and you don't like their answer, then the at-large person would be the next step. I mean, I don't know the 3 councils up here if they've faced that issue of a second opinion. But the main question is, you listen to the constituents. That's what you were elected to do. You're elected, obviously, to make hard decisions. I faced that fact on the school committee when we had to deal with the new superintendent. There was a popular person, and I chose for the person who I thought would do the right job. But you get elected, you make the tough decisions. If people don't like what you're doing, then I always say, run against the person. This is a free country. It's America, and that's basically, well, you got elected to do a specific job. If you can't get the job done, no, I do support term limits. No one's ever brought that up, I don't think, yet in these forums.
That's a
but-
different topic. Okay, Councilor Spadafora, job
Well-
description. What does a city councilor do?
I moved the mic, I broke the first one.
It's okay.
if you have to write a job description, it's like probably long hours, low pay, must be able to deal with people. But all seriousness, I think, all the councils touch upon it. And I don't mean this to think it's physically demanding, but it's more what a councilor doesn't do now. Been in this position for a little while now, and I've seen the evolution of, and it's good and bad, right? The information flows rapidly, good, bad, or indifferent, and sometimes wrong. But that information now is you are expected to be on 24/7. When I first got elected, they handed me a Nextel, which was those two-way communications with the radio. I don't call anybody within the city anymore. Everything is done by text or email. The same thing with the residents. Residents will text you and email you and go on Facebook 24 hours a day. Councils are doing, I think what you heard the two councils basically was, by definition, we're supposed to be here to be the governance, the legislative body, making sure that the budget stays in check and making sure the mayor doesn't become a king, right? That's the role of any type of legislative body. What the councils here do is we are not full-time employees like definition by like other communities like Boston. It is a part-time role, but in the same token is we probably work sometimes 40 hours a week, and other times we might work 25. But we get all types of calls. The storm drain in front of my house is stuff with leaves. I lost my dog. I had somebody call me last night saying somebody was in the dumpster BB looking for scrap metal, so I went out there with a flashlight, then I realized this probably wasn't a good idea, and I called the police. So the councils do everything now just because the citizens do demand it. It's 24/7. But at the end of the day, I think it's one council, like Steve said, and it's taking, we're elected to lead. And anytime you take a vote, there's not too many votes where you take where it's everybody's on one side of that vote, right? So it is really a balance and compromise, not only with the residents, but with the mayor, right? Because that's the other type of, the third spoke in the wheel. And then the councils. And what you see here is part of the work, and I think what you see on TV is a quarter of the work. What really happens are the emails between councils and residents. I mean, when Steve was looking to bring on that transportation director, he invited me for coffee. You don't see that stuff. That's the stuff that's really being done. And it doesn't mean we always get the answers we want, but 95% of our work is below the sea. It's that old adage of the iceberg. It's not what you see above the ocean line, it's what you see below the ocean line. And that's what happens. And you do it, you don't do it for the glory here. You don't do it for the pictures in the paper. You're certainly not doing it for the accolades. You're doing it because you live here, and that's the way you can make a difference.
Sounds good, sounds good. Okay, we're gonna move on to a new topic now. Now we're going to talk about diversity. All right, here's a question, Councilor DeMaria. Malden is praised as being among the most diverse city in the Commonwealth. How is the council making sure the diverse voices and perspectives are heard and served?
And you don't want me, okay, so this is a great question for me because I am all about the diversity in Malden. I've sat on the Chinese Culture Connection Board. I've sat on the Hispanic Association Board. I have participated in Malden Core and Community and Unity. I think that one thing I've personally done is on the docket, there is a spot for guests. And I have made sure last year as council president and this year, working with Councilor Sika, that we have guests come before us that are working pro bono, volunteering in our community, and I think it is so important that they share that with the council, and I think that that's, we're all one. So our Malden arts community, we just have some wonderful things popping up in Malden, and I embrace that, and thank you.
Okay, Jerry, this is kind of an odd question for you since you're not actually serving on the council yet, but is there anything you can say to add to that or address that? The question was, Malden's praised as being among the most diverse city in the Commonwealth. How is the council making sure the diverse voices and perspectives are heard and served? Maybe you could toss in some ideas of how you'd like to approach that?
Well, Malden, that's a great question. Malden should be proud of that. I had the privilege on the school committee to choose the first African-American superintendent, who was an interim, and I was really proud of that moment and that vote. But just like Councilor DeMaria said, everyone should feel welcome and inclusive. They should be invited to forums like this. Counselors should be encouraged to go to cultural events when they have, like they show off their food and cultures and different, like you see on the city website. So everyone should just feel inclusive and invite them when events happen. You know, it's basically
That
just
sounds
make them feel welcome and open.
good. Councilor Spadafora, same question to you.
I'm going to take a different approach. I mean, diversity to me is we definitely have to be cognizant of how people's ethnicity, and you want to learn those cultures. That's what makes this city great, and obviously this country great. But I often look at what we have in common, rather what we don't have in common. I've been lucky enough in my life with my dad being a proprietor of a local restaurant to see all types of organizations that come to the city of Malden. The North Shore Black Women's one is the first one that comes to my mind. But there's dozens of those types of organizations. Even the Kiwanis and the Rotary, they encourage the youth to join these academies. The city now, it's by law, but we now, because of our profile, we have to do all our ballots in several languages. The website is now bilingual, at least more than one. It's more than one language. It's not bilingual. I know something that I've been pushing for when we do flyers. It's not always that easy, but when we do neighborhood meetings, to put it in more than one language, because I used to get feedback from some residents saying, I don't even know what this says and I can't come to a meeting. So we're looking at purchasing a program that when they make the flyer, they automatically make it in different languages. So I think Malden's always been in the forefront of what we do, and I don't think it's been by design. It's because Malden's been a great place to live. Am I going too close to this mic?
Yes, you're kind of overlooked. You really project a lot.
Really?
I'll just end with that.
Okay. Councilor Winslow, same question
Sorry.
to you.
I think obviously there's things like Councilor Spadafora said, is making sure our basic communications for government are translated and that type of thing, that we have people on staff, and I think the mayor is very good about this, trying to make sure that we have people on staff that understand the different languages and cultures and reach out to them and make connections there. I think one of the things is a challenge is, as we are counselors, we have friends and family that help us, but we don't have the resources of the mayor and that type of thing to communicate. So that bit is particularly challenging when we have so many different languages and so many different groups. So one of the things I do try to do is both listen, and some of this based on my experience. I mean, I had some of my work was working in the health field, and in health, I mean, if you don't communicate, people die. So it's very important for people in the health community to learn to overcome cultural barriers and language barriers. So I learned about techniques from them of making sure that you even if someone's from another culture says something that makes you uncomfortable, or you are nervous about saying something because you think it's awkward, say it. Communicate. Don't worry. So I think that some of that is to be communicate, even if it's awkward, even if it makes you uncomfortable, or someone else uncomfortable. We have to deal with that discomfort as a community. And I think as you in the core meetings, the community overcoming racial organizing for racial equality, that's one of the things. It's kind of this principle that as we sit in groups, someone from a different background or perspective may say something that makes you feel uncomfortable. That's just part of living in a community like Malden. There's going to be tensions and points of view that are going to be surprising or make you feel uncomfortable, and that's just something we have to learn to kind of accept. I think the other thing is to sometimes look around the room and say, who the hell isn't here? So I mean, I think it's, you look around this room and we had some people playing mahjong in the background, but there's not sitting up here. So So what are those type of things? And so that's the type of thing is we do have to be observant and listen. And I think that's one of the things I've always kind of fought for the underdog and the underserved or under voice. So that's one of the things is just trying to be that, trying to serve and reach out to everybody. But it's a challenge. It's one of the challenges. It's not. If we can solve this in Malden, we can be a model for America. That's kind of what inspires me. This is a challenge of our country. The kind of the crisis at a national level is because that's not happening. I don't feel we're in a crisis in Malden. We are working these things out through groups like CORE and other type of things, but it's ever evolving and ever challenging. So we have to just keep at it, and that's just kind of we have to be committed to working with each other and respecting each other, and making sure that we have as many people in the room and listen. So that's some key things.
That sounds good. Seeing as how quickly we're going through this, we may not get to every topic, so I'm going to try and compress the number of topics a little bit. So I apologize to some people if we don't get to whatever question or topic you supplied. The next question for Jerry, we're going to drill down on diversity a little more, specifically the Black community. Here's the question. I mentioned diversity. However, the Black community has its distinct, diverse culture. Do you plan to reach out to them? If so, how?
Thank you. Another good question. That's the same. I'll go back to my past comment that, like every other culture, they should be included in everything. Elected officials should do their best to reach out to them and invite them and go to a function. I mean, they invite the elected officials, so they should, out of respect, go and engage in conversations, bring up what they want to do for the community, and the elected officials should ask them for their ideas as well.
Okay, Councilor Spadafora, same question.
Yeah, the way I approached it, I've been lucky enough. When I went to high school, I was very friendly with an African American, and I say this not to make it part of the answer, but I think it's relevant. Where it wasn't that long after high school, we all went on a skiing trip in Vermont, and this was probably 1994. And we went on the way back from skiing in Canada, we went into a pancake house in Vermont. And there was about 12 of us, and there was one African American gentleman who was my best friend, 6'2", but couldn't dance and couldn't play basketball. That was the best part of it. That was the joke. He had no rhythm, and we used to make fun of him. And the woman went around the table and tried to order all our food, and she skipped over him. So we said, "Oh, you missed somebody." And she came back and said, now this is 1994, and says to him, "We don't serve your kind here." Now the reason why I say that is because he used to tell me all the time, when I go in stores, they watch me, and I'm like, "Get out of here, they don't do that." And they do, and they did. And I was witness to this, and we knew at that moment we were probably in the wrong place. We all got up and left. So I always remember that in the back of my head when I'm talking to somebody, and I have friends that cover the gamut, that grew up in Malden, and I talk to them all the time. And now that I have kids, and my kids have friends, I have the ability to kind of channel down and talk to their parents. And it's just not the African Americans. It's a lot of the Asians too. They're to Steve's point, Councilor Winslow, excuse me. They don't want to come and ask us any questions because they feel embarrassed, or where they're from, authority is a bad word. So I always try to not just listen, but I try to go in and make it. I'm not a counselor, I'm your neighbor, and I want to talk about certain things. And I also bounce off ideas of a couple of my really close friends that are different ethnic backgrounds to see how ideas come, because I might not think it's, a bad idea, and I might think it's a great idea, but they might find it insulting, or they say, "Have you looked at it from this perspective?" So I channel my friends. I don't openly go out there and put something on Facebook because I don't think that's the right approach. I just trust my friend's opinion. I trust my family's opinion, and hopefully I try to do that on a daily basis. And am I going to be perfect? Absolutely not. But that's how you learn. And doing things like this is, once you get to know people, you realize you're all the same.
Good. Councilor Winslow, same question to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because we have our African American community is not monolithic here. I mean, it's great. Malden actually has some, part of our African American community has been here a long time, over 100 years. I think there was an African American football coach and sports stars and that type of thing. So, Herbie Jackson, the chamber was named after him. So, but we also have, folks that have moved, like the Southern migration during the 50s. And we have a rich group of Haitian and Caribbean Americans. So I think that's there's a real richness to our community, and that's reflected in our African American community. So, so that's the type of thing. I make friends. I go to the events and try to understand and deepen my relationships. I think one of the things I can do more of is actually the community of African Americans have been here the longest is ones that I need to deepen that connection. And I think that's the type of thing I do want to work on more. And I think also, like I say, working with the community, overcoming racial, or focusing on racial equality is another way to get those communications to go and learn myself and make those connections in the community is one of the things that I'm working on too. So I think it's just great. I think it's there's so many great and wonderful people in Malden, so it's just another opportunity to make new friends and new perspectives and just see the world in a different way. That's kind of the funny thing that's it's also a great thing that's an attractive thing about Malden. But like I say, I'm learning and I expand my horizons, and that type of thing is always one of the things I try for.
That sounds good. Just so everyone knows, I'm a Caribbean American from Trinidad.
Okay.
Just so everybody knows,
Okay.
in case I hadn't mentioned it.
Okay.
Councilor DeMaria, same question to you.
So, Joe, I think that my favorite event all year is to attend the North Shore Black Women's Association on Martin Luther King Day. It's a 3-hour event at Anthony's, and at the end of the event, we all hold hands and sing "We Shall Overcome," and it's a blessing. And I think I look around, there's usually 500-600 people there, all different colors and races, and it just puts everything in perspective. It saddens me, it really hurts my heart that the world is the way it is, and it is we haven't changed since the 70s, since the 60s, and having a birthday tomorrow, it makes me really upset that we can't get by all this. Why can't we just move forward with it? I mean, America is the melting pot, and I think it all begins with respect. So, love North Shore Black Women's, love the Caribbean Festival that was a couple of weeks ago, and again, we should open our eyes and our hearts to the entire community, and we'd be better off that way. So that's my preaching for the night.
Okay, seeing as we're starting really to get short on time, I'm going to skip a few questions in the transparency section and just touch on one topic concerning transparency. How do you ensure you are representing all Maldonians, new and old? For example, Councilor Spadafora, what steps have you taken to engage newcomers, renters, non-English speakers, and elderly residents?
I'll take that from the bottom up. So the elderly residents, I'm pretty familiar with. I make sure that I stay engaged with them because they all have different needs, wants, and desires, right? Schooling is not important for the elderly community. While it's important for some others, I come to the buildings frequently to see friends, because that's what I consider them now. For me, I don't have to go out and engage those residents simply because I have 3 children that go the gamut of ages. They're involved in gymnastics and soccer programs and after-school specials, and I've met more parents as being a parent of with my 3 kids now on soccer fields than I ever had to before. Before it was I had to go up and knock on a door and introduce myself other than my immediate friends and family. Now, because I have 3 children that range all the way from 12 to 7, I really have been learning about new people, and every day, you know, when my son gets in a new team, I meet new parents. They're not all, you know, they're not all from Malden for 20 years. In fact, most of them are not from Malden. There's a couple that are on there. And then I would probably say, you know, one thing when I reflect on that at a different perspective is, so my wife recently, I think 3 years ago, is a school nurse now in Salem. She used to work in the Franciscan. You know, and she used to bring the problems home. And I was never in the school committee, and the first couple days she was there, she gave me, you know, a checklist. We need to do this, to do this. I said, listen, we're not doing that. We got to stop talking about that there. But her perspective of not just the school, but more importantly, the kids, and kids coming to school and not having enough food, and kids coming to school with not clothes. In the wintertime, it makes you look at not only how lucky we are as a family, but I make sure my kids know that we volunteer a lot. The Bread of Life is one of our favorite ones. I have them come there. But the votes that we take have an impact on the people that really need it. The ones who don't need it, yeah, the vote might be important, but it's not if am I going to eat today. So I take all that into consideration now, and I think as you get older, you definitely mature, but you're also you look at life in a different way, and that's really helped me as a counselor.
Good. Hey, Councilor Winslow, how do you ensure you are representing all Maldonians, new and old? For example, what steps have you taken to engage newcomers, renters, non-English speakers, and elderly residents?
So, yeah, I mean, I think certainly, in reverse order, our seniors, you've definitely, a lot of folks at the Housing Authority and other buildings, we come out regularly. Sometimes I'm calling bingo or having ice cream socials, and we do that. My wife is involved with Senior Action. I'm not quite there yet, I'm getting there, but we stay involved with George Beers and other folks in Senior Action and go to their events. I mean, in terms of the broader community, you know, my granddaughters are kind of our anchor in some way. I've been very involved with Walam Kung Fu Studio, which has introduced us to many people in the Asian community, staying involved with the Chinese Cultural Connection. I know working, I just got my literature translated, working to make sure we do that kind of particular outreach. And I think, you know, in general, one of the perspectives I have is also, you know, I'm both an old comer and a newcomer. The Winslow family is originally from New England, but I grew up in California, so I'm I know both worlds. So having a long family history in New England, but also feeling like a newcomer. So I try to relate to both sides, and I also learned from my family's history that the best times in New England have been the times when the newcomers and the established people worked together and created compacts and alliances. And when those things break down, it can have very negative consequences for people. And even the people who may win at one point, from that point, they can lose in the end. So I think I'm very humbled by that history, and that's why I'm so committed to making sure that we are having the discussion and creating alliances and integrating new people into Malden and Massachusetts, because we have no choice. The other choice is just bad. So I think that's just, we have to have that commitment, be humble, and work to ever you know, renegotiate the compact that is Malden and America. So
That sounds good. Councilor DeMaria, the same question to you.
Thank you. So I'm an old timer, and I'm a proud old timer. I brought my 3 children up in Malden, and they went to Glenwood School, which is now a condo facility. And I see the evolution. I see the change. I hold on to a lot of what was our foundation, but it is exciting to change. It is exciting to move forward and to see where our opportunities and our possibilities can go as a small community in Massachusetts, and I think we've done a great job. One of the things that I've personally challenged myself is to work hard with social media. you know, a lot of people my age don't even know how to turn a computer on. I sound like I'm 100, don't I? I just stop it. But I've worked really hard this summer. I'm doing a weekly Where in the World is Councilor Debbie, and it's engaging residents that I didn't even know watched me, and promoting the beautiful community that we live in. So I also visit all the senior buildings, and I absolutely love doing that. I was fortunate to inherit my mother's bone china cups, and at this building here I brought in maybe 50 bone china cups, and I served them tea, and the residents were like, oh, I have these, and I said, well, you should be using them. So it's a great way to touch the older people that have so much knowledge and are so interesting, but yet to fold in the new residents, whether they're homeowners or renters, and hear their perspective of things. And I think it's a blending of really listening to everybody and trying to figure out how do we make it all work together. So
That sounds very good. Jerry, your take, same question.
Well, seeing that I'm not on the council, that's been the running joke of the night. I can look at it.
Well, how do you look forward to
Well,
being
when I come into places like this and visit the seniors and around the city, one important topic for them is safety. They have the right to live their life, to be safe. We know a couple of months ago there was some burglaries and break-ins around the city. They shouldn't have to endure that. Like I said, I was a former police officer in the Air Force. That's my primary, public safety. And I would assure them that, police officers should be doing more patrols at night, during the day as well, to have people feel safe. And I think we talk about, too many apartments. I believe that we need to focus on senior housing, and housing not only for seniors but for veterans. I'm a veteran, someday I'm gonna be a senior, and I may be looking one day. And then you touched upon children. On the school committee, parents complain that the schools are overcrowded, and we need to figure a way into the future to lessen the burden on the schools and the teachers.
Okay, that sounds good. Let's get to a question concerning development issues. For Councilor Winslow, what is your definition, did we start with Craig last? Yes, we did. So Councilor Winslow, what is your definition of affordable housing? And how do you plan to alleviate housing costs while not overburdening residents with traffic and overcrowding issues?
So, I think the very typical, definition is if you're spending more than a third of your income on housing, that's not affordable. So, that's a very typical thing, and in a place like Malden, that can be a lot of money these days. So, I definitely think that we should not just focus on lowest income housing, but workforce housing. There's people working full time, sometimes even 2 jobs, who it's becoming more and more difficult to live in Malden. So I think that is the type of thing. And what I've learned from other communities, Somerville and Cambridge have had to deal with this as their property values have skyrocketed. And what we need to do as a community is actually have a plan. It's not perfect. We are subject to the regional economic things that are driving up salaries, and that is attracting people and growing the demand for housing. But we can do what we can, and like I say, that by working with things like the Community Development Corporation, creating affordable housing trusts, dedicating our CPA money to smart projects that are affordable, like Habitat for Humanity, and other type of things. I think those are the type of things that we should work on, but we should have a plan. I think that one of the things I see, there was a big sigh of relief from the councilor and the mayor when the housing production plan said that we had enough land dedicated to affordable housing. We didn't have to worry about this Chapter 40B requiring us to have more housing. But I still think one of the things that makes Malden is it's been an affordable place for working people to live and raise their family. And that's what we have to focus on in terms of housing. If we don't focus on that value, we will just become a community where it's very wealthier people living, and the working people will be forced further and further out. And Malden will be an even more different community. So I think we have to focus on that value, making sure we have affordable housing for our working people and families. And I think also one of the things we have in Malden is transportation is affordable. It's one of those components. Maybe we can afford a little bit more cost in our housing because people take the bus. I think it's amazing when you look at it. Malden, 40% of people get around by transit, by bus, walking, an increasing number of people bicycling. That saves people a lot of money in these days. I mean, you look at car payments, $500 a month or more plus taxes and insurance. It's expensive. So the fact that you get a T-Pass for $84 a month and get around is a big thing. And so that's the other type of thing. That's why we want our buses to run better. We want it so that people can cross the street more safely. Just because a car is an extra expense you can't afford, it shouldn't be unsafe to go through your neighborhood. So those are a couple of things of working not only on affordable housing but affordable transportation are a couple of things we can do as a city.
Okay, that sounds good.
So great.
Okay, Councilor DeMaria, same question. What is your definition of affordable housing, and how do you plan to alleviate housing costs while not overburdening residents with traffic and overcrowding issues?
Okay, so this is the deal. When the MBTA came into Malden many years ago, the old timers in Malden were like, oh my goodness, this is going to ruin our community. So fast forward to 2019, the T is the biggest asset, or one of the biggest assets in our community. And along the way, planning was not created. We just kind of floated along, and if a developer or a couple of certain developers came into the community, we were grateful. Now we're in demand. Now there is a need to live in Malden. Everybody wants to live in Malden, whether it's the transportation, whether it's our school system, whether it's close facsimile to Boston, but we're in demand now. So yes, planning is so important. We need to really not just let a developer come in. We 2 years ago, along with Councilor O'Malley, we proposed inclusionary zoning. It got through ordinance, and I think Councilor Spadafora was the chair. We went to the planning board, and no one even knew what it was, so it failed. I think we really need to bring that forward, and we need to educate our residents as well as our council how we can offer a balance, a plan of affordable housing and small development. Not a priority, but to create Malden to be the best it can be. I mean, again, we're in demand. I did mention the Habitat for Humanity, and so I believe that's where we really do have to have a plan. We can't just haphazardly, not have our mitigation, and not have everything that we need and we require of these developers.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, Mr. Leone, same question. What is your definition of affordable housing, and how do you plan to alleviate housing costs while not overburdening residents with traffic and overcrowding issues?
Well, I'll go back partly to my last question that I think the plan and we should focus on is housing for, again, seniors and veterans, and possibly less taxes for everybody in Malden. Obviously not dramatic decrease, because we need, you know, other things in the city. But the burden with the traffic, part of the problem is, I think Malden's overdeveloped. Too many apartments, and that's one of the reasons why we have the traffic, and then there's talk about and this was an important topic that wasn't brought up, and it will be in upcoming forums, this talk about potential bike lanes. A lot of the people in the city don't want, we can't even control traffic. We're talking about bike lanes. This is not North Dakota where we have a lot of open space to do this stuff, so that's my take.
Okay, thank you. Finally, Councilor Spadafora, the same question to you.
Yeah, I would say, first of all, this is not a Malden problem, right? So you don't have to turn on the TV to realize that, I won't go near that mic, that we you know, anywhere around the inner city of Boston is facing the same challenges. My definition of affordable, I think it's depend who you ask. I mean, you can give the textbook answer like Councilor Winslow said, and he's right, and that's the answer. But somebody who's elderly and somebody who's just getting out of college with a lot of student loans, those are way different parts of the prism. You know, we probably are overdeveloped. I agree with Jerry, but it's what we have, and I think there are some good plans that are in the works to carve out some income. The Community Preservation Act does allow us to use some of that funding for certain areas. I know the Malden Redevelopment Authority has always done first-time home loans. You know, the challenge is, I would probably say in the last 15 years, Malden goes through these cycles like every community. When Mayor Howard built the 5 schools, you had this big influx of, I don't want to say immigrants, but they were immigrants. They came in because education was important to them, and that was great. And as they come in, it's 101 economics, supply, demand. It drove up those housing. And then there was a little bit of a flux because of the housing market, and we had some people coming in and trying to play that game, buying and selling, and that failed miserably through the country. And the second thing is, or the third wave is now, is we can't help, we are too close to Malden. We've seen the progression as we're watching over the hillside, we're watching Boston, we've known Cambridge, like Council Winslow have said for years, we've seen what happened to Somerville, we know methods in there, you can pick up the newspaper, and our zip code is there. We have the proximity, we have the transportation, we have a really good school system here, we have more than one really good school system here, we have options, and there are great things about Malden that people like and want to live here. You know, and that desire is something that people are willing to pay for. And what I'm hoping is, it is a delicate balance. I want to see the housing market stay strong. I want to see people come here and put roots in and afford to live here. But I also want to balance that people who can't afford to buy a house, maybe have the opportunity to stay in their apartment, and or the elderly who can't afford to stay in their apartments. There's got to be programs and places in there. You know, there's a couple that are out there now. I know that several councils have talked and they're working on some plans, and I think it's way too early to discuss them, but there's no textbook for that. There is no one answer for that. There's no right and wrong, other than the fact that I think we just, as a council and as a community, need to do better for that. And I think we're ready to talk about it. And I think one of the mechanisms is definitely the Community Preservation Act, and it's not that I don't think we were ready to talk about it before. I think you have all these things going on, unfortunately, and sometimes that goes below the bottom of the barrel, but I know for a fact it's coming.
Okay, due to time constraints, the very next question is going to have to be the last round, and then we'll go to closing remarks. Okay, last topic for the evening, different topic. We're going to Councilor DeMaria concerning global warming. I know, but here's the question. How is Malden working towards limiting the impact of global warming, including flooding issues and heat island effects?
Well, I think the first thing that comes to mind is last year we funded a Honeywell project through our finance committee, and that is upgrading all of our schools and our public buildings with LED lighting and buttoning up on all the wasteful things that are going on. And I know that they through the building department have been working on all the schools over the summer, and I was very proud of that. That was really a last minute thing before we recessed last June, and I think global warming is here and we can't ignore it anymore. And for Malden, I am all about solar and LED and doing as much as we can for our public buildings, so.
Sounds good to me. Like I said, I'm presenting these questions as they're given to me without too much modification, maybe a pronoun here and there. Okay, Mr. Leone, the same question to you. How is Malden working towards limiting the impact of global warming, including flooding issues and heat island effects?
Well, I haven't really seen anything, to be honest, that the city's doing. I mean, the city should be pushing for solar energy. When you talk about flooding, I know the area of Roosevelt Park, that was an issue that wasn't, brought up, and I think I'm the only candidate.
That's one of the future topics,
Yeah,
but we're running out of
but
time.
I just wanted to throw that, I'm the only
Yes.
candidate that supports the real, grass, not all artificial grass. But I personally, and this may be unpopular with a lot of people in the room, I don't believe in global warming. I mean, I know, people may laugh and stuff. I just think that it's evolution, and Malden should just do more things. If it's gonna save money, then yeah, we should go to solar energy.
Okay, that sounds good. Councilor Spadafora, same question to you. How is Malden working towards limiting the impact of global warming, including flooding issues and heat island effects?
So, I'll take, the flooding issue is probably the hottest one. So I sat on the first step of the mayor was lucky enough to put me in the Energy Efficiency Committee, and I sat there, Councilor Kamel was the ward council, and I was carrying that torch, and Councilor DeMaria mentioned some of that work with the Honeywell. We've also, part of that, we were able to get a grant from the community. I believe we bought 4 or 5 electric cars for the parking department, which cuts down, which is 0 emissions. We passed the plastic bag ordinance, so the city of Malden no longer has a plastic bag ordinance. Part of Howard Field, or Howard Park, I know there's 2 names over there. Part of that cost over there, which I don't people remember, it was about $8 million. There was $3 million of actual water work that was done underneath there, because that neighborhood, and I forget the name of the, I apologize, but that neighborhood, which is the cul-de-sac, that would flood because of stormwater drains that would go all the way to the Riviera. Part of that park was spending the money to fix that. I know we're looking at the Malden River in terms of there are cleanups happening over there. There's talks about bringing back certain species of plants on that riverway. I know the schools are recycling a lot more. I know we were passing the trash to recycling. We looked at solar even in City Hall. It's not always that easy, but one thing I think we've always been try to do in the city is try to stay a little bit ahead of the curve. Are we going to have a major impact, I think, of global warming? No, but I think if everybody does their part, you have a major impact. I foresee the next thing is probably going to be like eliminating plastic straws here. I know the mayor's office has been looking at to get as many of those electric cars as possible into the city. There's some challenges with which technology is getting better on, emergency vehicles, making sure they're working, certain torque power in those vehicles to push snow, because we have to get at that. But I think as a council, we've done tremendous amount of work to always look at that. We have a tree warden now. We've planted, I think, more trees in the last 5 years than we've probably planted in the last 10 years. I know councils have been supported. The mayor's put an awful lot of money there. So I think we're doing not nearly enough. I definitely want to say that. But I think we are on the cusp of doing that. And we have a committee now. We have a tree warden. It's top of mind. And, I'll steal a little Councilor Winslow's thunder. We have a bike path with people, they're not getting in their cars much to walk down the street. I wish I used it more to exercise, but in the same token is I think people are more understanding of what can happen in the environment by the little everyday things. And I know my kids tell me all the time, don't throw that in the barrel because I'm gonna hurt a turtle. So it works, right? But we can definitely do more.
Okay, and finally, Councilor Winslow, I'm gonna repeat the question last time, you're gonna be the last one tonight. How is Malden working towards limiting the impact of global warming, including flooding issues and heat island effects?
So, I guess I'm taken aback that we have a candidate for office in Malden who does not believe in global warming. I have to say, in college, California, I was in the chemical engineering program there, listening to some of the top chemists then 40, 30 years ago.
Steve.
I'm just a bat, but let's talk about, we owe this to our grandchildren to work on this. So what are we doing? I in the springtime, put together a forum on sustainable transportation, because we need to look at bringing electric buses and bus rapid transit to our city so that we can move more efficiently. We need to look at things like, we have very few public electric charging stations, so if we're gonna go to electric vehicles, we have to look at that. You know, one of the things in terms of investment, you know, we're looking at related to the bike trail, probably over $40 million invested in connecting our bike trail into Boston and to Lynn, so that can relieve traffic pressure and to make our signals smarter. You know, we're doing a lot of things, but I think we can do more. I mean, one of my things, like I say, with Bike to the Sea, I was able to build a coalition to make this significant improvement in Malden. And I see other communities like Medford, our rival, we maybe have to have rivalry with Medford on this. They have what's called Go Green Medford. So they have a community, not only are working on their buildings, but systematically look at these things. So we need to build a citizens organization that will strongly advocate this. We have a lot of individual people talking about this. We as counselors have to help get our citizens organized so we can figure out what we can do in Malden. At some things I'm doing, I know in many of our highland areas, there's flooding because of increased storm, rain coming down. That's impacting our lowlands like Bowman Street. So we have to come up with strategies. There's literally $1 billion the legislature is proposing to help communities adapt to climate change. So we need to have a plan. If we bury our head in the sands, we won't get $1. And so that's why you need to vote for people that are gonna believe in this stuff, because otherwise we're gonna be left behind and flooded. I mean, the other things I'm looking at is, you know, there's actually some initiative to even look at doing what the Dutch do, a storm surge barrier in Boston Harbor. This is something that was even looked at 20 years ago for the Saugus River. Those are the type of things. I mean, literally, Superstorm Sandy, $70 billion in damage. The Dutch have learned to plan for the 10,000-year storm, so they might spend $500 million now, but then they're not spending that $70 billion. I mean, if we have something like that happen to Malden, literally a third of Malden will be underwater, and that will damage people. So this is a serious thing. It's maybe not that, you know, gonna happen tomorrow, but in the next 20 to 50 years, this is gonna happen. And if we don't act now and start working now, there's gonna be major expenses that we have to pay as a city, and our residents will be impacted. So the sooner we get working together as a community, the better.
Okay, we're gonna go a little bit off script here. I apologize ahead of time.
Dance off?
We're gonna sing happy birthday to Debbie?
But this isn't a debate tonight, but I have to give Jerry a brief moment to respond to that. If there's anything you want to say, Jerry, you have the floor.
Well, Councilor Winslow has the right to call me out. That's my belief. That I don't believe there is. I mean, part of his initiative, he's focused on future cars and what the Dutch are doing and what came, you know, the bike path with other cities. We need to focus on Malden and the stuff now. Traffic is out of control. We have pipes that are dirty. We just need to focus on Malden, fix our problem now, and then these are probably ideal things for the future.
Okay, going forward, there will be a Councilor at Large debate hosted by Malden Access TV, I believe sometime in early October. 4th, okay? You guys can put the gloves on and go at it then. But for right now, we're gonna go into closing remarks. Oh, yep, and before closing remarks, I see someone out there. If I made an offer earlier, if there are any candidates for office who would like to jump in for a few seconds, introduce themselves, and say something, I'm willing to give you the floor.
Use one of those mics?
Yes, yes. Make sure, he's tall, make sure.
Thank you so much, Joe. Yeah, I was actually at a Deborah Park meeting tonight, so I heard about this forum debate on Facebook. So just wanted to come down, but thank you for the offer. I appreciate it. The discussion's been great between all the candidates, so it's been awesome to watch. Thank you very much.
Okay, now I'm going to give the candidates the floor and for closing remarks, and we're going to start with Councilor Winslow.
Yeah, thank you so much for everybody coming out tonight in the audience, as well as anybody watching at home. I appreciate you taking the time to learn about the people that are running for elected office. I think you heard tonight that I am someone who is passionate about Malden, and that I really want to listen to what you have to say and work on both issues, both large and small. I'm someone who has the capability to not only work on traffic, but to work on global warming. So we don't have to be one size fits all. I'm a big thinker. I've been able to do things like clean up the bike trail while we're building it. I think that's the type of thing I do. I not only want to make sure we're fixing potholes, but we're taking care of the long-term future of Malden. In voting for Steve Winslow for Councilor at Large, you're going to have someone who can do a lot and for your city, both in terms of small things and big things. So let's work to achieve more together, not just fair and mediocre stuff. Thank you very much. Great.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Winslow. Next, for closing remarks, we'll have Councilor Spadafora.
Thank you. I too want to thank the people for coming out, not only in the building, but I see some residents who don't live here. I want to thank Joe and his team for putting this together. It's always good to get in front of residents. And I'll echo some of the things Councilor Winslow said. You know, I've been a councilor for a long time. I do get energized not only by the people I meet on a daily basis, but some of the topics that always come forward. I think a lot of the hard work in the city, and we're not done. There's a lot of things left to do, and there's a lot of topics that we didn't discuss today. There are some crises, but in the same token is we have to take them head on, and I think the current council and the mayor's office are doing a tremendous job there. I want to continue fighting for the residents of Malden. A lot of the development in Malden that comes in here is not cookie cake type of development. They want to put 7 to 10 stories in there. And they want to give us no benefits, whether it's low income, whether it's parking, or they just throw revenue. And I've always been one to stick up for the residents and making sure that we're doing what's right for the city of Malden and more importantly the neighborhoods. I've always been available. I think most people who've met me or sent me an email realize that I'm pretty quick in my responses and I follow through. I'm also the same type of counselor to tell you if I can do something, I'll do it, and if I can't, why I can't. That's part of the reason being elected. I'm vested. I've lived here my whole life. I have no plans on leaving. I have a pretty successful career in the daytime, but when I come home, I have 3 children, and that's what makes me get up every Tuesday and every other day to make sure the city of Malden is not only safe, but a great place to live and grow a family. And I think there's a lot of things behind closed doors that residents do not see, and they, quite frankly, probably don't care about until it comes to the front of their front door. And I think we've done a lot of work as a council to get there. And I want to see the fruits of the labor work through. I mean, City Hall is just a symbol of what's happening in Malden, but I think the people are changing. I would have never thought 5 years ago we'd be talking about a river walk or Malden Arts Community or planting trees and all those, I want to call them fun things. What we were fighting about was making sure we had enough time for the teachers, enough money for overtime in the police and the fire department, and making sure people weren't throwing trash all over the place. Those arguments will always continue, but they have gone down tremendously. I think everybody, especially the city workers in this community and the city government employees, they all see a vision and a passion. I'm lucky enough to have been part of that passion, and I want to continue going forward. So I ask for one of your 3 votes in this coming election. And again, thank you for coming out.
Okay, and thank you. And we're going to have some closing remarks from Mr. Leone now.
Everybody hear me?
Yes.
I can hear.
I like to thank Joe and his team. I like to thank all the counselors. I like to thank everybody that's here tonight. And if this goes on live, well, not live, this taped and goes on TV, people who are watching, we have 4 people on the stage that are running for 3 spots. I personally know all 3 people, and they're good family people, but this is not a popularity contest. I urge everyone to evaluate all 4 of us. Go to my website, voteleone.com, do your research, make an educated vote, because this is, as I said earlier, the most important election Malden is gonna face. The results, we have a mayor election, the results, these are the people who are gonna guide Malden forward. So if you agreed with things I said tonight or with any one of them, I hope I can count on one of your 3 votes, November 5th. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leone. And finally, we're going to get some closing remarks from Councilor DeMaria.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you to each and every one of you that are either watching or here in the audience. My name is Debbie DeMaria. I am a counselor at large, and I absolutely love what I do for all the residents in Malden. I feel over the last 6 years and 1 term on school committee that I've brought the city council a little bit more adhering to respectful dialogue, adhering to working together. That's really important to me in order to get things done. Moving forward, because I'm not done yet, moving forward, it is important to me that we keep safety in our community number 1. We have a community of 64,000 residents, the second most diverse in the state of Massachusetts. We need to be safe. That is the most important. I think the Malden Police Department and our fire department is doing a fantastic job. Just this week, I got 3 calls before 8 a.m. about the traffic on Eastern Avenue during Mystic Valley Regional Charter School opening, and I called the chief, and the next day they had patrols there to smooth out that traffic. So they're cognizant of it. It's not just the development, it's that we have a lot of schools in the community as well. Second thing is I want to move forward with the lead pipe initiative, thank you, the lead pipe initiative, and find different ways to continue to fund it and fund it even more aggressively. Again, that is part of our safety concern. And personally for me, living in Ward 3, the hospital site has to move forward with something. And I've actively been working with the residents and Hallmark and the administration, and I'm very hopeful that something will be done to benefit our community up at the Hill. So again, I'm not done yet, and I respectfully ask for one of your 3 votes on November 5th. Debbie DeMaria, thank you.
All right, thank you. This has been an interesting episode of Malden Talks. I don't believe anything quite like this has been done in the city before.
Great.
At this early stage?
I don't get it.
Never,
First
never.
out of the gate.
So hopefully we can do this again sometime during another election cycle. Typically, we don't go this long. Typically, episodes are probably 10 to 15 minutes, but this is a special situation, a special circumstance, and I think a lot of citizens want to hear what you have to say. And I know I'm repeating myself, but I apologize again if I didn't get to ask your question. The answers were thorough, the answers were long, and the answers chewed up all of the time. Maybe I'll save some of the questions that were submitted for another round in another year. But like I said before, from this point onward, MATV is going to take over future interviews of this sort, and I'm going to ask everyone to show up and vote. Thank you, have a good night, and look for future episodes of Malden Talks.
Thank you.